The manila envelope felt heavier than paper should feel. My hands were shaking so hard the pages made a sound like dry leaves. I stood in my kitchen at 6:47 in the morning, still in my robe, coffee going cold on the counter behind me, and I read the same paragraph 4 times because my brain refused to let the words mean what they meant. 25 years. 25 years I had packed his lunches, sat through his football games, held his hand in the emergency room when he broke his arm at 11 years old. And now this envelope was telling me none of it had ever legally been mine to hold. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from a number I hadn't seen in a quarter of a century. I want what's owed to me. And I want it before the funeral. There was no funeral yet. Nobody had died. Not yet. My name is Diane Whitfield. I'm 63 years old, and for 31 years I ran Whitfield & Associates, a boutique accounting firm I built out of a spare bedroom with $11,000 in savings and a fax machine I bought used from a going-out-of-business office supply store. By the time I sold my stake 4 years ago, that firm was worth $6.2 million, and I'd kept a controlling interest in a family trust worth another $2.8 million, a trust one built specifically for one purpose. For my grandson. His name is Caleb. He's 25 now, a structural engineer, kind in that quiet, unassuming way that made strangers trust him instantly. And for every one of those 25 years, he called me Mom, because I raised him. My husband Walter and I raised him from the hour he was born, in a hospital room where our 19-year-old daughter, Renee, signed a private adoption agreement with trembling hands and told the nurse, "I can't. I'm not ready. Please just let them do it." We didn't force her. We didn't manipulate her. We loved her and we loved that baby, and when she walked out of that hospital and didn't come back for 11 years we didn't chase her. We raised her son as our own legally and completely, with an attorney, a judge, and a sealed record. The trust, $2.8 million, was set up for Caleb's future. His education, his first home, his security. Every filing had his name on it, not hers, which is what made the envelope in my hands, 25 years later, so impossible to understand, because it was a legal filing. And it had Renee's name at the top of it, claiming she was still, in the eyes of a Delaware court she'd apparently found, Caleb's rightful biological parent with an unextinguished claim to trust assets designated for issue of Diane Whitfield, a technicality her lawyer had apparently built an entire case around. It started 3 weeks earlier at Sunday dinner. Renee had reappeared in our lives 18 months prior, teary, apologetic, dressed in a soft cashmere sweater that looked far too expensive for a woman who told us she was between opportunities. She said she wanted to know her son. She said she'd changed. Caleb, generous to a fault, welcomed her with open arms. I was more careful, but I didn't want to be the reason my grandson lost the chance to know his birth mother. So I let her in. That Sunday she arrived 40 minutes late, smelling faintly of gin under her perfume, wearing a diamond tennis bracelet I didn't recognize and definitely couldn't have afforded on the administrative consulting salary she claimed to have. She kissed my cheek. She called me Mom too, which had always felt strange, given that she was my actual daughter, and I was raising her actual son to call me the same thing. Halfway through dinner, I got up to refill the water pitcher. The kitchen door was cracked. I heard her voice, low, syrupy, talking to Caleb's girlfriend, Priya, who'd stepped away from the table to help me. "He's a sweet boy," Renee was saying, swirling her wine, not realizing I was 3 feet away. "But he has no idea how much money is sitting in that trust. Diane's got him thinking it's some modest little college fund. It's not. My lawyer says once we establish parental standing, half of it reverts to me by default. Delaware trust law is a beautiful thing when nobody bothers to read the fine print." Priya, to her credit, went very still. "You're not actually going to fight him for it," Priya said. Renee laughed. A light, delighted little laugh, like this was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. "Fight who? An old woman who thinks estate planning from 20 years ago is bulletproof? Please. I gave birth to that child. Biology doesn't expire, sweetheart. It just waits." I stood in that kitchen with the water pitcher sweating in my hand, and I felt something in my chest go very cold and very quiet. I did not confront her that night. I went back to the table, poured the water, and asked her how her new apartment was coming along. She smiled and said it was coming along beautifully. I smiled back. I had already decided I was going to find out exactly what that meant. The next morning I called my longtime estate attorney, Marcus Felt, a careful man who drafted the original trust documents himself. I asked him plainly whether a biological parent who'd signed a legal adoption relinquishment could later claim standing against a trust that named the adoptive parent as sole grantor. "Diane," he said, "that's settled law. A finalized adoption terminates parental rights permanently in nearly every state, including Delaware. Unless the adoption itself was fraudulent or improperly executed, there's no default reversion. Whoever told her that is either lying to her or lying for her." That word, fraudulent, sat in my stomach like a stone. I pulled our original adoption file from the fireproof box in our closet, the one Walter and I hadn't opened in over a decade. Everything was there. Renee's signature, the judge's seal, the witness statements. Clean, legitimate, nothing to exploit, which meant someone was building a case around a lie, and building it well enough to require a lawyer's letterhead. I hired a private investigator, a retired paralegal named Tomas who specialized in quiet financial digging, and asked him to find out who Renee's attorney was and who was paying for it. 3 days later he called. "The attorney's real," Tomas said. "Firm called Pallister and Cho. But here's the thing, Renee's not paying the retainer. Someone named Gregory Ashford paid an $18,000 retainer in cash 2 months ago. I didn't recognize the name. Yet, I invited Renee to lunch. Neutral Ground, a quiet cafe. I set the manila envelope unopened between us on the table. "I got something interesting in the mail," I said calmly. "A filing with your name on it. Care to explain?" Renee didn't even blink. She reached for her iced tea, stirred it slowly, and gave me a smile I recognized from childhood, the one she used right before she told a lie she'd rehearsed. "Mom, it's just precautionary. My lawyer says with modern equitable adoption doctrine, biological parentage retains what's called a residual beneficial interest in generational trusts, unless explicitly extinguished through a secondary instrument. It's a technicality, boilerplate. I'm not trying to take anything from Caleb. I just want to make sure my rights are documented in case anything ever happened to you." It was a beautiful lie. Confident, layered with just enough real legal-sounding language to make a nervous person believe it. I nodded slowly, letting my face go soft and a little confused. "Oh," I said. "That does sound complicated. I don't really understand all that legal talk anymore." She patted my hand. "Don't worry about it, Mom. Leave the paperwork to the professionals." I smiled at her. Inside, I had already decided. I believed nothing she just said. Tomas found him within a week. Gregory Ashford, 48, a man Renee had been seeing for 4 months, a self-described private wealth consultant, with 2 prior civil judgments against him for investment fraud in Nevada, and a lien on a condo he no longer lived in. His actual occupation, as far as Tomas could tell, was finding vulnerable women with money nearby and attaching himself to it. He wasn't funding Renee's legal case out of love. He was funding an investment. I went to drop off a birthday gift for Caleb at Renee's apartment, the one she said was coming along beautifully. It was a modest 1-bedroom, mostly empty, boxes still unpacked after 18 months. I heard her voice through the door before I knocked, on speakerphone with a man's voice I now knew belonged to Gregory. "Once we get the injunction freezing distribution," Gregory was saying, "the trustee has to negotiate a settlement just to avoid litigation costs. Even if we lose eventually, old ladies like her settle for half just to make lawyers go away. That's the play, Renee. We're not trying to win. We're trying to make winning more expensive than paying us." Renee laughed. "God, you're brilliant. She actually believes I feel guilty about the boy. I could barely sit through that dinner. He kept calling me Mom, and I just kept thinking, you have no idea what's coming, sweetheart." I stood outside that door with the wrapped gift still in my hands, and I did not knock. I drove home, sat in my car in my own driveway for 11 minutes, and made a decision. I decided to become exactly what Renee already believed I was. A confused aging woman who didn't understand all that legal talk. I started small. I let my hands tremble slightly when I signed things in front of her. I began wearing my reading glasses pushed up on my head and then patting my pockets, asking Caleb, "Now where did I put those?" "Oh, they're right on my head, silly me." A little too often, a little too theatrically. I let my voice go softer, slower, with small pauses before I answered questions, as though I were reaching for words that used to come easily. Walter thought I'd lost my mind the first time he saw me do it. "Diane, what on earth are you?" "I need her to think I'm not paying attention," I told him quietly, in our bedroom door closed. "The moment she thinks I'm sharp, she gets careful. The moment she thinks I'm slipping, she gets sloppy. Sloppy people talk. Sloppy people leave things where confused old women can find them." I told Marcus Felt, my attorney, everything, the overheard calls, Gregory Ashford, the fabricated legal theory. He didn't smile often, but he smiled then. "So we're building a case," he said. "While she thinks she's building one against you." "Exactly like that," I said. I started accidentally, leaving my phone unlocked around Renee. Its screen displaying old family photos, nothing useful. Bait to make her comfortable enough to snoop, so she'd believe there was nothing to find. I let her help me organize some old financial paperwork one afternoon, watching from the corner of my eye as she photographed several documents with her phone when she thought I'd gone to the bathroom. I hadn't gone to the bathroom. I'd stood in the hallway, watching her reflection in the dark television screen across the room. She thought she was outmaneuvering a fading old woman. She was walking directly into a net I was weaving, one calm, trembling-handed thread at a time. I had Marcus draft a document, a fake amendment to the trust on real letterhead, that appeared to show me quietly moving $1.4 million out of Caleb's trust into a separate account for tax purposes, with language vague enough to suggest, to an untrained and greedy eye, that I might be trying to hide assets before Renee's claim could reach them. It was bait. Nothing in it was real. No money moved. But I made sure Renee saw it. I misplaced it on my kitchen counter during a visit, then made a show of scooping it up in a fluster when I noticed her near it. Tucking it into a drawer I made sure she saw the location of. I told Walter loudly in the next room in a voice I knew carried, "We need to move the rest before anything gets frozen. Marcus said we have until the 15th. I planted a small voice recorder inside a decorative ceramic bird that had sat on my kitchen windowsill for 6 years. One Renee had walked past 1,000 times without a second glance. I paired it with an app on my phone that let me listen in real time. 3 days later, Caleb's 26th birthday dinner was scheduled at our house. Renee Gregory, whom she'd finally introduced as her boyfriend Priya, Caleb, Walter, and me. The night before, my phone buzzed on my nightstand at 11:40 p.m. The recorder app. Live audio, motion triggered. I sat up in bed and listened, phone pressed to my ear, Walter watching me in the dark. It was Renee and Gregory in my kitchen. They'd let themselves in early to help set up for the dinner the next day, a kindness I'd allowed specifically to give them the run of the house. "She left the drawer unlocked again," Gregory's voice said, muffled but clear. "That amendment's still in there. If that's real, she's already moving money illegally to dodge your claim. That's leverage on top of leverage. We use it tomorrow in front of the family, corner her while everyone's watching. She won't fight back in front of the kid. People like her never do." "And if Caleb finds out I'm actually suing him?" Renee asked. "Frame it as suing her, not him. Tell him it's about protecting his interests from an old woman who's clearly losing her grip and hiding assets. Make yourself the hero, Renee. That's the whole strategy." My hand didn't shake at all as I set the phone down. The trembling, it turned out, had only ever been for them. The dinner table was set with the good china. The set Walter's mother had given us 38 years ago. The same set Caleb had eaten off of every birthday since he was 1 year old. 12 candles on a cake shaped, absurdly like a bridge, because Caleb had once told me structural engineering felt like holding things up so no one falls. Renee waited until dessert. She set down her fork with theatrical precision, looked at Caleb with an expression I imagined she'd practiced in a mirror, and said, "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear it as someone who loves you, not as an attack on Grandma. Caleb went still. Okay. I've had to take legal action regarding your trust, Renee said, voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. Because I found out your grandmother has been quietly moving money out of it, over $1 million, before I could even establish my rights as your biological mother. I'm not doing this for me, baby. I'm doing this to protect what's yours. Gregory nodded gravely beside her, playing his part. We found documentation. It's all very concerning. Caleb turned to me stricken. Grandma, is that true? I set down my napkin. I did not raise my voice. I have never once in 63 years found volume to be more persuasive than precision. Renee, I said, would you like to tell Caleb what Gregory said to you in my kitchen at 11:40 last night? Or should I play it for him? The table went silent. Renee's face did something complicated. A flicker of confusion, then real fear. I don't know what you're talking about. I set my phone on the table, tapped the screen twice, and let 11 seconds of Gregory's voice fill the dining room. Frame it as suing her, not him. Make yourself the hero, Renee. That's the whole strategy. Priya's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb's face went white. The amendment you saw in my drawer, I continued, calm as still water, was fake. Marcus drafted it specifically so you'd find it. Nothing moved. Every dollar of that $2.8 million is exactly where it's always been, in Caleb's name, protected by paperwork that has been airtight since the day he was born, which your own attorneys confirmed, Renee, 3 weeks ago in writing when I had my lawyer request the basis of your claim. You've known since then that you have no legal standing whatsoever. You kept going anyway. That's not, Renee started. Gregory Ashford, I said, turning slightly toward him, has 2 prior fraud judgments in Nevada. I have those documents too, if the table would like to see them. Gregory's jaw tightened. He said nothing. You are not suing me to protect Caleb, I said quietly to my daughter, the woman I had carried, raised for 19 years, and forgiven for 11 more. You are suing a 25-year-old boy who calls you mom out of kindness, to fund a man who has done this to at least 2 other women before you. And you did it in my house at his birthday over the cake I baked him. I reached across the table and picked up the folded, fake amendment document Renee had photographed 3 weeks earlier, the bait printed out sitting in a folder beside my plate. I tore it once cleanly down the middle, and set the 2 halves beside the birthday candles. There's nothing left to sue for, I said. There never was. Marcus Felt, who I'd invited under the pretense of a family friend joining for cake, stood up from the far end of the table and calmly informed Renee and Gregory that a countersuit for tortious interference, fraud, and harassment had already been filed that afternoon, and that Gregory's prior judgments made him personally, not just professionally, exposed. 2 sheriff's deputies, who Marcus had arranged to arrive precisely at 8:45 for an unrelated civil paper service regarding Gregory's outstanding Nevada judgment, knocked on the front door 4 minutes later. Nobody at that table needed me to explain the timing. In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled with the clean efficiency of dominoes falling in a line I had spent a month setting up. Gregory Ashford was served with the Nevada judgment enforcement at my dinner table and, within 6 weeks, faced a 3rd civil fraud suit, this one filed by another woman he'd been consulting for in Ohio, who came forward after seeing a local news brief about his arrest. His assets, thin to begin with, were frozen pending judgment. Renee's attorneys at Pallister and Cho withdrew from her case within 72 hours once Marcus sent them the recording and the documented fraud judgments against their client's funding source. Renee was left personally liable for $34,000 in her own legal fees, plus a settlement of $22,000 to cover our costs in the countersuit, which Marcus and I ultimately reduced to $9,000, not out of forgiveness, but because I did not want to spend 3 more years in courtrooms over a woman who had already shown me exactly who she was. She moved out of state 4 months later. Caleb has spoken to her twice since, both times briefly, both times at his own initiation. I have not stopped him. I have also not encouraged him. But here is the part that mattered more to me than any of the legal fallout. Priya's parents, who'd been quietly worried sick that their daughter was marrying into a family engulfed in a lawsuit, Received a handwritten letter from me explaining everything plainly, along with an invitation to dinner, not to defend myself, but because I did not want two innocent, kind people carrying anxiety over a mess that was never theirs to hold. Caleb's two closest friends from engineering school, who'd heard fragmented, frightening rumors about some inheritance lawsuit, got a calm phone call from me clearing up the truth so they wouldn't whisper behind Caleb's back at his own birthday party the following year. I did not want anyone innocent paying for what Renee had built. It rained hard the night Renee came back, 7 months later. I remember because the gutter above our porch had started overflowing again, the way it always did in a real downpour, spilling a thin curtain of water just past the doormat. She stood there soaked, no umbrella, a duffel bag at her feet that looked like everything she owned. Gregory, I later learned, had been arrested in Ohio on the new fraud charge and named her as an unindicted co-conspirator in a related civil filing, which had frozen what little she had left. "Mom," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that might have broken me 25 years ago. "I have nowhere to go. Please." I stood in the doorway, dry warm light spilling out behind me, and I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "I love the woman I hoped you'd become," I said quietly. "I'm not able to keep pretending she's you. You're welcome to call a shelter. I'll pay for 3 nights at the inn on Route 9, no strings, and I'll do that once. But you cannot come into this house." "Caleb is my son," she whispered. "Caleb is my son," I said, just as quietly, no anger in it at all. "You made that true 25 years ago in a hospital room, and I have spent every day since honoring what you asked of me. Don't undo the one good thing you ever gave him by pretending now that you didn't mean it." I closed the door. Gently. Not a slam. I never wanted our story to end the way it began, with something violent shutting. Walter was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. He didn't ask what happened. He just slid 1 cup toward me and said, "You did the right thing 25 years ago, and you did the right thing tonight." "I know," I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it without any performance behind it at all. "Here's what 25 years taught me. Love someone enough to raise them and never let anyone, not even the person who gave you the chance to, convince you that love was a mistake to be corrected later. Real family isn't about biology holding a grudge until it's convenient. It's about who shows up every single day without needing to be sued into it. If you had to choose between blood and the family you actually built, what would you do?" If this story hit you the way it hit me telling it, hit like and subscribe and tell me in the comments, would you have let her in the door that night? Or was I right to close it?